Tenänit lenigi rajat hiotikat nehna hautan senigi pat etten ta niikata ne andat eero. Ako ei ahteis lenigi sidi ei hätikat in ahteis ne on sidi hat ei siitä ne astanda. Si ei hateis siitä niin hot ei siitä eero ei hätikat pahuin intle. Den näpäsen liitle. Den är ju niitle. Ha siitä ei eero ei häti besaadigi. Viipihessä hotet eero ei hätikat. Att det är att det ako tehdään ne, että ne ei häti paat että niille. Ako ei siitä tuota taas, annako siinä ei häti peinikästä huidna tolle. In the teachings of Arden, there is always someone that we know in our lives that stand out with great quality of gentlemanly and womanly. These qualities are very easy to distinguish. And myself, I always look to my Uncle Joe. Uncle Joe was my mom's younger brother, and he lost his mom along with my mother and the rest of her siblings when he was about 6 years old. And of course, that in a way among our people, when a mother passes away, usually her children are farmed out to her sisters, and so it was that my Uncle Joe was put with a family, and I think he went with the Joe family. I always thought that was interesting, my Uncle Joe with the Joe family. But he was raised by his aunt, and she put him into boarding school, and right away, and he spent his time there. But he came home one summertime, I guess it was, that he found out that everybody was pretty much in need of food. And so he found employment on the railroad. And about that time, he was probably 13 years old, but he was very much, he appeared like he was a lot older. And so they hired him. Of course, he also didn't give the truth about his age when he applied for the job and was hired. But he was a good worker. He could do the work of several men, and he was very quick and agile in his work assignment working on a railroad. And the crew chiefs, of course, liked him a whole lot. And so he was always called out to work, and he did earn very well. But about that time, World War II broke out, and all the men that were of 18 years of age, they were drafted. And he happened to see that he was going to be drafted, and so he went down to the recruiters and enlisted in the Navy. He always told me, he says, when I saw that man in his Navy uniform, he says, that's what I wanted to wear. And so off he went. And he turned 14 years old while he was in the Navy. But they went, of course, passing through the Panama Canal into the Pacific. And he was with a ship that was a supply ship. And sometimes they were escorts to the other ships and that were out on the Pacific Ocean, the aircraft carriers and so on. But he was also involved with many of the wounded in that had to be moved from various places, and sort of a rescue ship. But when he was on the cruise ship, they became the target for the enemy, and they sent in, of course, the kamikazes at various times, and his ship was sunk. And he drifted around in the ocean for some time, hanging on to debris until he was rescued. But he saw a lot of the action that took place off of Guadalcanal and the other islands as the military was going from island to island. And when the war was over, he came home, and of all the people he could possibly marry, he married my father's young sister, my Aunt Nellie. And Uncle Joe was my favorite uncle. And I've mentioned that in the way of our relatives that has the most influence on us is generally our uncle. And Uncle Joe was the kindest, the most gentle, the most peaceful man that I had ever been around. I used to run away from home and just go find him and stay with him for several days until they came and got me and hauled me back home. But he was a man of peace. And so when I hear people talk about our people in a negative way, anything from the time that the early history of the United States, all of the native people in that had something to do with the way that this country came to be. And all of the major conflicts from the Revolutionary War, the War for Independence, the native people were involved. The idea of the way that this government is set up, where we have a representative government, a republic, the native people had some form of government of representation and as a republic. And so the things that the native people have contributed to this nation is something that a lot of people take for granted. Of course, there were many things that were done against the native people. Many times, even words like the only good Indian is a dead Indian, that came around about the time of Andrew Jackson, one of the presidents of the United States around the 1800s. But a lot of times history books don't tell about how the Cherokee people helped Andrew Jackson in the War of 1812. And when the British decided to give it another try to take over this country. And Andrew Jackson and his forces held them off. But the forces that he had the majority of them were probably native people. And he promised them, if you will fight with me, I will give you the land that you live on, and you will be there for as long as the grass grow and the water flow, you will remain there. And that was probably one of the very, very first treaty agreements or something of that kind that was broken. And it was that eventually Andrew Jackson, of course, is responsible in his time for the Trail of Tears of the Cherokee people. But then, of course, I have relatives in my family that fought in World War I, and they were not even citizens of the United States. They didn't become citizens until around the 1920s. And of course, during World War II, our Navajo people used the code language as code talkers, and fought a successful campaign in the South Pacific. And of course, I've had relatives in that who were actually in the military that served in the European theater against the Germans. And there are so many things about the Native American people. They have always been involved. They have been humble, and many times, they've been called on to do things. And they raised their hand and took an oath to defend this country and to defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. And I know that so many of our veterans in that are that way. I know when I took the oath, I made a promise to the people of the United States that I would defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. And sometimes, every now and then, we have people that make statements that are just very harmful to our people, and not only to their mind, their heart, their spirit, but it is that our young people need to be proud of the efforts and the doings of their people in history. There are so many things that are not recorded and not told in the right way. And then we have a young lady that made a statement and about not killing enough Indians. That's just the same as saying, the only good Indian is a dead Indian. In this modern time, that is something so very foolish, irresponsible. Words have power, words have meaning, and it's not very good. And this young lady needs to be aware that the Native American people have given their lives so she can say that, but it's not the right thing to say about a people that are trying to be peaceful. My late Uncle Joe would have probably had different thoughts about the things that are said by this young lady, and he would not let it bother him. He would just let it wash off of his back. And it is no reason to be offended in a way that you carry a grudge or revenge. That won't work. And if we really want to do